Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am Zach Reed. I am joined tonight by JMic and Matt Foreman. We are back again to do some more rookie running backs. It's the 2023 Dynasty Dummies Rookie Hootenanny Running Backs Part 2. We're going through the second 6 of DLF's top 12 from Valentine's Day because we like to keep it topical. We like to keep it current. But we'll go down through a few more guys in the catch-all show. But right now, JMic, Matt, how are you fellas this evening?
I am doing well. Glad to be back this week after missing last week.
We missed you last week. We told everyone that essentially because of the amazing work that you had done previously, you had earned some time off, some PTO, if you will, here, paid out by the DFPN and all of the mega bucks that have been made over the last several years. So we hope that you enjoyed it because you'll be working that off for the next few years.
I certainly did not. Certainly glad to stop having to wake my son up every 4 hours to give him a breathing treatment. So. Both of us being able to sleep all night is definitely something I've been looking for. Something I've enjoyed the last 2 nights.
That's a W, bro. Certainly glad to hear that the little one's well. Glad that you're back with us, and we get into part 2 with the running backs, the second 6, if you will. And before we jump into the fun that we'll have with these players, I won't hold everyone back. And obviously, if you're new to the program, welcome. Thank you for checking us out. It's fun that we get the opportunity to be able to tell you what we see on film, be able to laugh a lot, be able to enjoy this process that we've been able to help refine over the last few years that have given us success, that has helped us to be able to trust more of what we see in our leagues when it comes to our drafts and our own process. And we hope and we encourage that not only do you hear what we say and run with what you will, but that you would do the work, that you would take time to be able to jump into film, find trusted names, find trusted results, things that you can lean into to help you become a better dynasty player. And we encourage you to be able to find your process and go as well. Before we get into it, gentlemen, is there anything that's top of mind? Is there anything that's changed? Did the combine just totally and utterly rock your world and even your film grades? anything before we get going?
So not the combine, the NCAA tournament. That's what's rocking my world right now. After the first 8 games of the tournament, I went 8 for 8. There are 20 million brackets on ESPN. There are only 34,000. That is 0.17 of a percent. Like, and it just made me think how much of all of this is just absolute luck. And both for us doing evaluations and projections and playing fantasy football, but also these players, man, like we got to remember, like landing spot is something that changes the entire trajectory of a player, whether they land in a system that can utilize them, whether they land behind players, whether they, can put it all together coming from whatever system they were running in college. Like all of that is just a crapshoot. There's so much luck and so many variables. And I think it's important to keep in mind just how fine a line it is and how much of a tightrope that we're walking with, the difference between being successful and just completely washing out. And especially with these, the second 6 and some of these later round drafted players, they're going to have to hit exactly the right path in order to have success. We're doing our best. We're evaluating for talent. And look, we miss even on that. It would be nice to have the Doctor Strange, like be able to sit there and look through the 14,605 possible outcomes for every player's career and know that this is the one that's right. But we don't have that ability. And so I say that to say this, like, understand we're evaluating for talent. but there's a heck of a lot more that goes into this, and there's a lot of luck involved in getting these right. And for these young men, that this is their livelihood and this is their life, for them to be successful.
That's such a sobering reminder when you think about the fact that sometimes it takes every single break to break exactly right. And especially when you're talking about day 2, and in some instances, and probably the majority of these instances, day 3 running backs, you have to have the depth chart go up in flames, and all sorts of things typically need to happen, unfortunately, for these folks to get a shot. It's not necessarily likely that they land in a place and just straight up outplay people. Aside from, of course, we think about Brian Robinson last year, who it seemed like he was making his way toward getting the nod towards starting at first. Obviously, he has a situation with his health, and when he was assaulted, things of that nature. But even after he came back, he still found a way to end up being the guy starting by season's end. So that's certainly not the norm, but it's really interesting to see what can be made of with these guys, because again, under the right circumstances, anything could happen. It's a great reminder, Zach. Thanks for that. All right, fellas, let's get into it. Without further ado, the second 6. And I'm not sure, and one of the fun things this week, not sure who exactly has a lean toward either player. We don't necessarily have any school allegiances, anything like that this week. So we'll be able to bebop back and forth, and we'll see whose man's is this. That's what this title of this episode should be. Whose man's is this? It'll be fun to find out. First up on the board this evening is one Kendre Miller out of Texas Christian University, aka TCU. And he wrote an absolutely magical run along with those Horned Frogs this season into major fantasy darling relevance when it comes to these prospects. Really interesting thing about what he was able to do in 2021, though, on 83 attempts, he averaged 7.5 yards per carry, which was first in the NCAA, which is really cool to be able to see. But he comes back in his junior season, 224 carries, 1,399 yards. Get that man one more yard for 1,400. 17 touchdowns. Unfortunately, not Zach Reed rule approved. And for those that may not know, when we talk about Zach Reed rule, typically, and I don't know if you've kept up with the percentage, Zach, or if you update it every year, but essentially the majority of players who end up finding a ton of success at the next level are guys who have had at least one season where they've caught at least 20 balls. Unfortunately, Kendre's not one of those players, but incredibly dynamic on the ground, really leaned on throughout the Big 12 schedule and throughout as they made their run to the national championship game. Kendre Miller, fantastic player, tough as nails. Zach, we'll start with you. Let's talk Kendre.
Yeah, hippos are deceptive. Even though they spend most of their time submerged in water, they're too heavy to even float. And when they're on land, they appear bulky and slow, but they're deceivingly fast. They can haul their multi-ton frames at speeds of over 22 miles an hour. Renowned hippo enthusiast Kendre Miller has been taking notes. Miller's a big back. He's 5'11", 215 pounds, closer to prototypical than a lot of the backs we've seen in this class. He's one of the handful of players in 2023 for whom size is not a concern. And you expect Miller to possess the power that he has and his ability to finish runs, driving his legs forward for extra yards. What's unexpected to me is Miller's speed. I think he often catches defenders flat-footed when they're anticipating a more lumbering back. And when he attacks a rushing lane, Miller doesn't need things to be clean to succeed. He's got very good feet in traffic. He has the ability to pick them up as he picks his way through that mess. And I think Miller is also really decent once he gets into space where he can use jump cuts, but he also uses really good angles to add extra yards to gain chunk runs.
Consistently falling forward, consistently finding daylight, consistently not a lot of wasted movement when it comes to Kendre and his ability to be able to make plays. Foreman, Tell me, are you seeing Kendre in a similar light?
Yeah, I was impressed with Miller watching his tape. It's interesting that we have two sets of two different running backs in this class where they both went to the same school. And I think Miller kind of gets overshadowed a bit by Evans at times, but I think they're I don't know if I'd call them equal players, but I think the gap between them is probably smaller than what a lot of people are thinking right now. Yeah, I think Zach hit the nail on the head with Miller there. He's got excellent awareness, run with power when he called upon. He's got great vision. He processes the field well. So not only does he use that vision, he can see, he kind of anticipates. He's almost playing chess to a certain extent while he's running the ball. He hits the hold force, has good contact balance. He can break through arm tackles. And like Zach mentioned, he's got enough speed where he can beat those defenders to an angle where it looks like he might get cut off, but he shows you that extra little speed burst he has there to try to get those couple extra yards. He does a really good job about beating defenders in that short area as well too. In that beating in like the winning those phone booth battles that we always hear about. So he does a nice job there as well too.
Uniquely able, and I think both of you hit on this when it comes to his footwork. One of the guys who uniquely, and again, you don't expect it, but he's able to chain moves together. And so he's able to hit you with a jump cut and a spin out of it and truck through somebody and keep going. And I won't say the vibes that he gives me when it comes to, because again, we talk about comps and everything else that people get frustrated with sometimes, but there's a guy right now in the NFL who has a first name that also ends in Dre, and I get a lot of vibes just in terms of the things that he's able to do when it comes to running downhill, and I like it a lot. Again, no perfect prospect, Kendre Miller. We start talking about hippos, and they're very dangerous to people, but it doesn't mean that they're the be all end all. Foreman, let's talk a little bit about Kendre's drawbacks here.
Yeah, I think one thing he is prone to is getting strung out when he's moving horizontally the line of scrimmage. He gets a bit strung out there. And something Zach mentioned earlier as well too. I think he can catch. I just don't know what his role is going to look like playing those passing downs and in the pass casting.
Oh, he froze up again. He looks good though.
He does. This was a strong one. Before he kind of had the hair coming back, whatnot. Now it's just somewhere over the rainbow.
I need to get a screen grab. Look at that.
All right, well, we'll keep it moving, Zach. Let's hear what you got, man.
So deceptive speed and game-breaking speed are two different levels of fast. Kendre Miller does not have the sustained speed to me that is necessary to rip off runs to the paint every time he touches the ball. He also lacks a little bit of creativity, and this is going to be a refrain, I think, when we go through this group of running backs. But Kendre Miller struggles with creativity. He just can't make something spectacular happen when a play doesn't go as scripted. He struggles both with trusting his blockers to develop a rushing lane and also with an inability to escape that initial defender when things do break down. And while I do think Miller is an adequate pass catcher, I don't believe he's going to be used as a primary weapon in an NFL team's passing attack. He's got a tendency to get lazy en route and has a habit of sitting with defenders. Neither of those things you love. I think Kendre Miller probably ends up as a backup initially, but has the potential to take over a between the tackles role if the need arises. It's not exactly fantasy gold, but there is some potential resting just beneath the surface. And I got one more nugget that's not necessarily Kendre related, but while I was doing the hippo research, and I know you saw this tweet, I discovered that there are 100 hippos in the wild right now in Colombia because there were two of them in Pablo Escobar's zoo, and they escaped and they bred. They couldn't catch them, and so now there are 100 hippos in the wild in Colombia. So just a little fun fact for you.
Next Wednesday night at random bar night trivia. It'll be great. That'll be good. All right, moving on to the next. On to the next one. We're traveling down to Auburn, Alabama, and talking through someone who people have had a lot of high hopes for since he was a freshman, Tank Bigsby, measuring in at the combine 6 feet, 210 pounds. And he busts onto the scene as a freshman for those Auburn Tigers. Gave you 834 yards. People were super excited about his upside. And the next couple of years, Auburn as a team really struggled. Didn't quite have the pizzazz, the national recognition, or quite frankly, the wins that continued to put those players at the top of people's boards to be excited about. But he was still a very productive player. Over 1,000 yards in the sophomore campaign, and here in 2022, he averaged 5.4 yards per carry, 970 yards on the ground. He was able to eclipse 20 catches each season, both his sophomore and his junior campaign, where he had 30 catches for 180 yards. The really cool thing about Tank Bigsby is I think, just maybe, Zach, we've only seen the tip of the iceberg because of how porous that offense was, but we're looking at a really talented back. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I think he's being underrated by the community right now. I really do like a lot of what Bigsby does. The first tank that was ever developed was developed in England in 1915, and it was nicknamed Little Willie after the William Foster and Company that built the prototype. Cartavius Bigsby, however, earned his moniker in Pee Wee football when he would continue to run even after his helmet came off. And his mom legendarily told him, "Boy, you was moving like a tank." And Tank Bigsby has not stopped since. Bigsby embodies the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none." I think he's a better than average receiver out of the backfield, but he isn't necessarily running the most difficult route tree. Bigsby does crease run, though, and I love that. When he gets inside, he doesn't need very much room to get through the line of scrimmage, and then he can utilize his burst and acceleration. Even Bigsby's long speed is decent enough to put up chunk plays once he hits that second level. And although he's not necessarily a big bruising back at 210 pounds, Bigsby has enough power to run between the tackles, and he rarely loses yardage because of his ability to continue churning his legs at the end of runs. There's just an awful lot to like about what Tank Bigsby does.
Explosive power, contact balance, vision in traffic. Tank Bigsby was a very, very much a pleasure to watch for me. And I'm always drawn to folks who are instinctual or creative in space. And I feel like Tank does so much of that. And what's really cool is, even though, and one of the drawbacks for me is sometimes he runs to contact, which kind of bothered me, I was able to see his maturation from that freshman season to then into his junior season, where he was able to consistently cut to daylight. While he did have some missed opportunities that would frustrate the crap out of me, I really like what he has to offer. And at that size of 6 feet, 210 pounds, I must say that I feel like he's a guy that I won't say people are sleeping on, because people have been excited for him. But for whatever reason, that excitement didn't carry through the next couple of years, similar to the way that it did for Bijan, who did some otherworldly things at Texas. And we know how the story's gone for him. Foreman, tell us a little bit about what you think in reference to one Tank Bigsby.
So Tank's interesting because I'm not seeing the same thing you guys are. This will be interesting. I think this is really the first conjecture we've had so far this year. So things I like about Tank. He functions well in space, shows some dynamic ability, has plus speed. If given a crease, the guy can hit the home run if he needs to. And he's got some wow plays. Like I don't want to mince words there. There's plays where I'm like, okay, this guy can play. I don't know. There was some stuff going on at Auburn in the last 2 years with what was going on from Brian Harsin, the lack of quarterback play. I remember because it always comes back to Penn State with me about this stuff. So I remember when Auburn was playing Penn State last year, and I'm like, oh, we got to stop Tank and let Bo Nix beat us if Auburn's going to beat us. And I think that's what they did to a certain extent. But even then, Tank still rushed for like 90 yards and looked good in the game as well too. And obviously, Bo Nix couldn't beat us. So, yeah, I came away from his film less impressed than I had hoped to be.
Understood. Now, obviously, when it comes to Tank Bigsby, there's probably a reason that many people were not super thrilled about how he's continued to carry throughout his season here. Zach, we'll go back to you here. Let's talk through Tank Bigsby and some of the things about his game that you wish you saw differently.
Yeah, when you start to dig in a little bit closer, the continuous track starts to come off the Tank a little. In true Tank form, Bigsby lacks the consistency in his quick twitch agility, which puts him in contact with an initial defender more than you would like to see. Couple that with Bigsby's nearly absolute refusal to take a play to the outside, even when he's forced to, and he ends up fighting his way back to the original line of scrimmage and not getting much else. And as tough of a runner as Bigsby is, I think he still gets careless with the balls when he's in traffic, which you don't love to see, especially in an NFL where players are being taught to punch out. You see that all the time now, where guys aren't even necessarily going to try to make a tackle. They're going to try to jar that ball loose. It's a small knock, but fumbling issues have limited the playing time for many part-time backs at the next level. This 2023 class has so many depth players, both for the NFL and for your dynasty rosters, that I think it's difficult to pick through and find the gems. Sometimes the best thing we can do is look for players like Bigsby, who will most likely start out lower down a depth chart, but offers multiple avenues to find success. Or you just break ties to the coolest name. Either way.
Either way, whichever one works there. Foreman, we'll kick it over to you now. I know you said you didn't necessarily see it the same as Zach and I. So what were some of the things that you saw that gave you some pause?
Yeah, with Zach said, with his refusal to bounce the ball outside, sometimes he can struggle to run between the tackles. It looked like a lot of times he just gets what's blocked. Where he can, or a lot of there, he gets what, I wouldn't say he gets what's blocked every time, but there's a lot more plays than I would have liked of someone who I thought probably coming back from was at the 2020 season when he first came out. We're like, okay, this guy can play. You know what I mean? It just seems like he's taken a step back in the eyes of the analysts over the last couple of years. Of someone who I was super excited about as a freshman. I think he was SEC offensive freshman of the year. So that's not nothing. But it just seems like sometimes he just kind of gets what's there. He's got, like Zach also mentioned, he touched on too many negative rushes for me. Again, it's hard to say in these situations what. It's one of the things that I'm still learning my process on, about how much is the atmosphere of the player and how much is the actual player itself, especially when we're talking about these running backs, when there's so much other stuff involved with them, with, you know what I mean, stacked boxes with the lack of a quarterback play, bad offensive line play, you know what I mean, something that that player's not Cam Akers for, but he's at Florida State, but he had some of the worst offensive lines in college. We have to take some of these things into context. It's just, like I said, he shows that dynamic ability, but I just feel like there's a lot of times where he doesn't use it enough, where he just felt like I don't know, just, it seemed like there was a little bit more there, but he couldn't get to that little extra step or two to be able to really break the play open. He can catch passes, but it doesn't really seem like that's his strong suit. So again, I think there's a lot of things that I like about him in small doses that I'm like, okay, I can see that, but there's a lot of times where I'm like, what's going on here? He leaves me wanting more.
You know, it's funny you say he's not a tremendous passer. He led Auburn in receptions this year.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah.
with 30. So,
yeah.
I mean, and again, he's not a dynamic route runner, but I do think he's more than adequate in the passing game. But
Yeah, Tank's one of the guys. And I think for me, an area of opportunity that bothered me was that there were just several instances where I wanted more in terms of him hitting certain big plays. And it was just that he would miss because he showcases good vision in so many instances. And there would be some players like, oh, no, not that way. This way. No, where were you going? No, no. And I agree with you all in terms of him being strung out on those plays that go out wide. And then again, trying to just kind of force it up the gut sometimes, which was strange. However, I think you all are going to be very shocked where I have him rated, because I am, and I did not expect it, but I am all in for Tank Bigsby, and I think that it has so much to do with his ability to be able to be creative, his ability to let his instincts, especially I like what he does between the tackles, and I like what he's able to do, especially not even just after he's gotten his momentum going, but also when it comes to him keeping his feet moving and not being someone that is getting pushed back or getting bullied in that sense. I am very bullish on one Tank Bigsby. Now to the third running back on the evening. We head up to Pitt. So Matt, I'm curious how you're Matt giving the big thumbs down already for one Israel Abanikanda, or as some say Abanikanda. I guess you get to choose. Kind of a Kamara kind of deal here. Israel Abanikanda, running back out of Pitt University, Pittsburgh Panthers, aka arch rivals 2-1 Penn State Nittany Lions. Matt, I will give you honors here. So let's talk Israel Abanikanda, and as we do, let me also set the stage a little bit. 1,431 rushing yards on the season, 20 touchdowns for the Pitt Panthers. He led the nation in rushing yards, and he led the he led the NCAA in touchdowns rushing. He led the ACC in rushing yards. The man is a big play waiting to happen if you're giving him a runway. Let's talk a little bit. If you can muster up positive things to say about him, Foreman, I give you honors. Now is the time.
As much as I don't want to, there's a lot of good things to say about the man I'm going to just call him Izzy. So I was really impressed with his tape. He's got sufficient long speed. He's shifty. He's kind of like, I just like his shiftiness. He lets his blocks develop in front of him. He runs hard, and he not only does run hard, he runs angry. He does a nice job seeing the whole field like Kendre Miller does as well too. He's got good burst. He can get to the edge. He can bust off those big plays as well too constantly. It just seems like it was one play after another where he's busting off 40, 50, 60-yard runs, which was evident, obviously, if he's leading the nation in rushing. What was it, in rushing or rushing touchdowns?
Led in rushing touchdowns, but led the ACC in rushing yards.
Okay, again, ACC in rushing yards. You can't bring the guy down with arm tackles. And although he does run hard, he does it with patience. So he's just not a bull in a china shop. He does run hard, but he's doing it with thought. He's got excellent contact balance. Uses his speed and short area quickness to evade defenders at line of scrimmage, and he's a capable pass catcher. So someone who I was a lot higher on than I thought I was going to be based on the school that he went to.
Listen, that was very courageous of you, Matt. Thank you for being able to muster up those kind words about Izzy Abanikanda. I think that Abanikanda family and all the Abanikanda fans coming into this dynasty season appreciate that very much. Absolutely a walking big play waiting to happen. Zach, tell us about Izzy.
2. That's the number of games that Israel Abanikanda put up fewer than 110 yards rushing for the Pitt Panthers in 2022. And sure, the ACC isn't exactly a gauntlet of stout defenses, but the sheer magnitude of Abanikanda's rushing work is enough to be notable. Abanikanda is another prototypically sized back, which will work in his favor when framed against the rest of this Lilliputian 2023 running back class. He is a better than average inside runner, although I think his vision and patience are inconsistent at times. When Abanikanda does decide to be decisive, he has fantastic feet in traffic, even picking his way through holes that aren't completely clean. He has good contact balance. He absorbs or deflects hits while he continues to churn his legs. As inconsistent as Abanikanda's vision is behind the line of scrimmage, I think once he's in the open field, he appears to possess echolocation. Like he's running away from defenders on long runs, just kind of, he knows they're there before they even know that they're there, and he can get away from them.
Yeah, definitely an angle breaker. Not so much, I think, because he sets it up, but definitely because he's got the long speed that just makes people look silly. I struggled with Abanikanda. I did, and I don't want to come off like a hater because I don't know that I dislike him, but I don't have him graded super high. And I don't necessarily see him because I see why people like him. I get it. And I understand the home run ability, especially if you're talking about guys who's not going to have a ton of opportunity. If they get a little opportunity, what can you do with it? On a consistent run basis, I think he runs very timid. And I think that he runs to brace for contact, especially when he's in traffic. And it bothers me so much. It's something that is now burned in my brain. And I have a really hard time unseeing it because, again, you think about his season, he runs for 20 touchdowns, and 10 of those come from 4 against Rhode Island and a 6-touchdown, 320-yard game against Virginia Tech, where they tried to arm tackle like crazy. And that was the game where I felt like he really showed, if you try to arm tackle me, it's not going to work. Like, if you really bring it against me, I may have issues, but when it comes to arm tackles, he can break those and make people look so bad. I think his patience, I think he flashes good things with that, but I do think that it's subpar because I think sometimes I don't know that he's the great at being able to decipher between the tackles. And I think that a lot of times when it's wide open for him, if he has any sort of runway or space, he is a problem, period. When he's given a runway, he's very good. I don't love him in traffic. I do like his contact balance, and I do have a lot of questions in terms of the tenacity that he's going to be seeing if he's not going to be getting these wide open areas in the NFL, how that's going to translate. I get why people like him. I just don't think that I'm in that camp to be trusting that. Zach, back over to you. Any drawbacks in terms of what you see in Abanikanda's game?
Yeah, one of the skills that separates a great running back from a merely average one is the ability to create off script. And unfortunately, Abanikanda's game is really lacking that artistry when a play breaks down. Instead of escaping a jailbreaking defender, Abanikanda doesn't have that short area quickness or vision, and he goes down. And he also fails to identify opportunities to get outside the tackle when the initial play design gets blown up. And in spite of having those 24 receptions in 2021, Abanikanda is really not a confident route runner. Like, I don't think he likes to catch passes. He makes most of his plays on those little dump offs on the flat where you can get him in space, and that's fine. If Abanikanda lands on a team that runs primarily a zone scheme, so you're thinking like Chicago, Atlanta, Miami, that type of team, and if he gets an opportunity to see a high volume of carries, then I think there is potential for Abanikanda to make waves for fantasy football. But that seems to me to be a lot of ifs for a player who starts out as a between the tackles spellback.
Over to you, Foreman. Final words here on Abanikanda. I know you're a fan. Anything that you'd say that, hey, this isn't really it right here?
Yeah, again, the vision thing kind of struggles with at times at the line of scrimmage. He's not the best pass catcher, but he meets Zach's threshold there, so got to give him props a little bit. But I think I came off liking him more than you guys did, which, again, this is why we do this. If it was just us sitting here agreeing the whole time and just back-patting each other, this would be really boring. So those were the two big things that I wasn't really I'm down with. But other than that, I liked a lot of his stuff. But I do think that he does. I don't want him to become like Darrell Henderson, where he was just like he just has these huge running lanes to run through, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, looks awesome. I think he has a bit more quickness and ability than Henderson did, and so again, I think he's someone that I'm going to like more than maybe the consensus will, but I think it's okay. It's someone we're betting on here as probably a middle of the second round pick. We're not someone I'm really having to reach on. It's something I was doing with Algier all year last year. I was taking him probably higher than a lot of people are going to. I was taking him over Isaiah Spiller, and obviously that seemed to work out pretty well. So again, this is why we do it. This is why each person needs to do these things. Again, whether you have the skill, will, desire to do it, that's another thing. But I mean, if you're really gonna do this, you're gonna have players that you like more than consensus does. That happens whether you're talking about film review or whether you're talking about TVs, cars, whatever you're talking about. There's something that you're gonna like more than the groupthink does, and that's fine. So I think that Abanikanda is going to be someone that I'm down with more so than the Twitterverse.
Yeah, and but I don't know. I don't even know if that's the case for him. And I think a lot of people do like him, and a lot of people are complimentary of his ability. And again, when it comes to splash plays, like at least out of this group, I don't know if there's anybody who's got more than Abanikanda in terms of being able to really take it to the house, get big plays when he's out in space. Like, oh man, tail lights, like it's over. So I think he'll be a really interesting player to see. Hey, where does the NFL value him? Is he going to be able to get an opportunity to really even get on the field early, or is it one of those things where he's super duper buried? It'll be fascinating to be able to track as we go. Halfway through on the evening, let's go ahead and fast forward now. We're going back to Texas, fellas. We're going back to Austin, Texas. Yes, we've talked Bijan Robinson, but listen, every great superhero has a sidekick. Okay, maybe not every great superhero, but typically support is not a solo sport. Batman had Robin, and listen, so on and so forth. Roschon Johnson, out of Texas, 6 feet, 219 pounds, former quarterback, former all-world everything when it comes to players. And yes, he played a secondary role to the man, the myth, the legend, Bijan Robinson. And so the numbers, when you look at them, aren't staggering in terms of his ability. However, we will say that as a freshman in 2019, he did have over 20 receptions in that season. That was also his best attempts and yardage season, where he went over 123 attempts, 649 yards. But he did get more and more efficient as the years went on. Now, yes, without having the opportunity to really showcase any and everything that he had all the time, he had to pick his spots. And a lot of folks are pretty excited about Roschon Johnson. Zach, I'll go over to you first. Roschon, do you like? Do you not like? And is Batman to Robin a good comparison here?
You think, is he the Dick Grayson, or is he,
maybe not.
But yeah, no, I am one of the people who I really dig on Roschon Johnson. The sun is nearly 433,000 miles across and just shy of 93 million miles away from the Earth. Its size, proximity, and brightness make it seem like there are no other stars that exist while the sun is visible. The 2023 class is Bijan-centric. That's the universe we're living in, with everything else orbiting around the biggest and brightest star. But in that same Texas backfield, I think there's another star running back. I think Roschon Johnson is waiting for his chance to shine. And Johnson came to the University of Texas as a highly recruited quarterback. So for me, watching his transition to running back happen on the fly in the Big 12 was impressive. Johnson's intelligence and understanding of the game is on full display when he's pass blocking. He identifies and picks up blisters very well. And for a bigger back, I think Johnson has exceptional burst to and through the hole. When running between the tackles, Johnson will make defenders miss with jump cuts, but he also has exceptional contact balance, the ability to absorb a hit and then slide off it. Johnson surprisingly does an excellent job finding creases to run through, getting compact through the line of scrimmage. And this is a guy who's 6 feet, 219 pounds. So he is a load. And although I think he's not going to be pegged as a pass catching back at the next level, Johnson's adequate in the receiving game. He adjusts well to off-target throws and can create post-catch. So I think there's a lot of things to like about Roschon Johnson.
In the midst of that patience, he's a prober, consistent prober at the line of scrimmage. Kind of a now you see me, now you don't. I'll check this area. Okay, I've got quick enough feet to get to the next. Oh, all right, this area is not it. Up here's my spot. And I really like the way that patience, at least when I view it, and I try to do this in a manner as I watch that doesn't lend to some bias, but obviously we know that some of that can creep in at times. I don't see that as indecisiveness. I see that more of he has the physical ability to process what's happening in front of him within the trash and all the mess that's happening and figure out, okay, is this good? I know this is where the play is supposed to go. Let me get here. And all of this is happening really quick. And I think that was one of the more impressive things, that in the midst of not a ton of carries, how sharp he is in that aspect between the tackles, I really enjoyed watching. And I think that he's able to make and manipulate defenders at the second level, which is also good to be able to see too. And we talk about guys running to and running through contact. He's one that runs through contact consistently. A really fun watch for sure. Foreman, how do you feel about one Roschon Johnson?
Count me in the camp of his believers. Someone I had when I was speaking with Riley about this, he was like, all right, this is someone that he kind of compared Johnson to Miles Sanders in the sense that he's overshadowed a bit in the fact of obviously he was there with Barkley as well too. Obviously Sanders had that year where it was just him, and I really wish we could have seen that with Johnson, because that rookie that 1 year he was at Texas, the first year he had, was, you said it was 2021 or 2020?
No, so Roschon's first year was 2019.
Okay. But I believe Keontae Ingram was still there as well too. So he's never really never really had that backfield to be able to kind of seize it as himself. And obviously with Bijan there, it's kind of hard to do that. But that was kind of the comparison. And I think that it wasn't really a comparison, like I said, as a player, but it was kind of that thing where he's got overshadowed a bit. But man, this guy can play. He's an athlete through and through. He was the first guy that he was the only guy on this list of 6 running backs where I'm just like, I wanted to go back and watch that play. There was a little like 6-yard carry where I don't remember what game it was exactly, but he did this little hit the head fake, and he just plants that foot so hard on the ground and does a little head fake, and it's just like the defender doesn't know what to do, and he just scored. It was like a little 6 or 7 yard run for a touchdown, but I'm just like, that was one of the best 6-yard touchdowns I've ever seen. I mean, he's a great athlete. He does the hurdles that you want to see for these guys. He's very agile for his size, and he might be the best pass blocking running back that I have scouted. It's just amazing the way he's able to pick up those blitzers. Obviously, he can. I think his quarterback background is something you don't see a whole lot. You don't see a lot of quarterbacks moving to running back. Typically the process there is over to wide receiver, tight end. Obviously, something we've seen a lot with these bigger quarterbacks of them moving to tight end in the pros, whether it be with Tommy Stevens or like what's the guy's name who went to Virginia Tech who played tight end for the Bills for a while there? Logan Thomas, exactly. But Johnson, I mean, unless I would have known, I would have never known he was a quarterback. And I mean, he obviously runs all those wildcat plays, but it just seems like that's just part of their offense. But I mean, the guy really gets going downhill. He can line up out wide as well too. He may not have been the most targeted pass catcher, but he does a good job of it when it's called upon. It's someone, again, I was really impressed with watching his film. I was just like, it was a really fun watch. I thoroughly enjoyed watching him play football.
Yeah, more. Give us more. For those only more samples to choose from. It's kind of like those really delicious samples. If you've ever had a a membership at Sam's Club, and they've got those samples out everywhere, and you try the samples like, that was actually really good. They're like, oh, you can buy it right over here. I don't know if I want to buy it, but I would love another couple of samples because I came to the store hungry, and this is a problem. So, Zach, we'll go over to you now when it comes to Roschon Johnson and some of the things that are areas of opportunity for him.
Yeah, let me just walk back by and get a couple more of those doggies in a blanket.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But as much fun as Roschon Johnson's film is, I think there are definitely some flaws that eclipse his finer points on occasion. When there is early penetration by the defensive line, Johnson slows down. And worse, he slows down his cuts as well. And even when Johnson is operating at full speed, he has trouble with quicker defenders. He doesn't have that lateral agility to avoid speedy linebackers, and he'll get taken down on initial contact too often in those one-on-one situations where he's got a quicker defender in front of him. And I also think, and this drove me nuts, Johnson exercises too much patience in the red zone, where he tries to choose and find that perfect opportunity rather than what the quickest option is going to be. And when you're in that short area, when you're inside the 20, you just want to get gone. Because Roschon Johnson was part of a backfield with the best running back prospect in the last 5 years, it's difficult to have an accurate picture of exactly what he is or what he will become. It was really fun for me to watch his progression coming in. You mentioned he was a quarterback. He threw for 7,700 yards in high school. He ran for another 4,900 and accounted for 85 total touchdowns. And to watch his progression and transition to running back was really impressive. I loved watching players who grow over the course of their career. It was really evident with Johnson. I think Johnson has the size, enough speed, and enough pass catching ability to be very productive at the next level, but it's going to take a team that is willing to look beyond Bijan. Johnson probably begins as a backup, but man, that potential to transition to a starter is absolutely there.
Will someone fall in love with Roschon Johnson in the NFL? That'll be interesting to be able to track. Foreman, final words here on Roschon. What do you got?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that Zach touched on was his biggest drawback for me is once he gets stopped moving, it's kind of hard for him to get going again. And again, he gets strung out a bit of the line of scrimmage as well too that Zach mentioned there as well with these quicker defenders. But man, there's a lot of things here to like. I could honestly see Johnson as a day 2 pick pretty easily. I think he's solidly a round 3 guy. And man, he might even, I don't know. There's a lot to really like here. I mean, he's got great size. He can catch the ball. I mean, some of these things you can kind of, I don't know how much you can work on with some of these things, but man, it's just like, you can see a really good running back here and you don't have to squint that hard. So, with some of these other guys, that's like we mentioned with some of these other ones where it's like you got to squint a little bit and kind of see past their warts. But man, these warts with Johnson are kind of small. So someone again that I don't think I'm hired because I think a lot of the people I've talked to have been really impressed with Johnson with the sample size we've seen. So like you guys mentioned a bit here, it'll be interesting to see how the NFL values him.
Very well. Last couple players here on the evening. Last but not least, Tyjae Spears from Tulane, riding that green wave to 1 billion wins this season. And for him, some personal success as he was the American Athletic Conference Offensive Player of the Year in 2022, where he led the conference in rushing yards, where he led the conference in rushing touchdowns, and he led the conference in plays from scrimmage, and he led the conference in yards from scrimmage. Tyjae Spears had a season like no other, and what he really needed basically in order to go off like this was for Cincinnati to not be doing their normal bullying thing that they've been doing over the last couple of years. That's what he really needed to really blow up. That's what it was. At least that's what I tell myself. In this junior season for him in 2022, 1,581 yards, rushing 19 touchdowns, and he just squeaked by 22 catches, 256 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. Tyjae Spears, someone who a lot of people getting a lot of late buzz, and he was invited to I believe, the Senior Bowl, and people were pretty excited to be able to see him down in Mobile as well. Foreman, you get first dibs this time when we're talking Tyjae Spears. Let's talk about it. What you got?
Yeah, don't hate on Tulane. Hey, they beat USC in the bowl game. The superstar in the making, Caleb Williams, USC.
Facts.
I don't believe Addison played in that game, though. Is that correct?
I don't think he did either.
I don't think he played in that game. Spears, someone. So Spears, he's slippery, definitely slippery. He runs with more power than a back that you'd think of his size. Again, with that slippery, he's also shifty as well too. He kind of plays like I wanted him to. He's able to stop and start quickly. He's got enough speed to beat defenders to the edge. He's a comfortable pass catcher at times. He functions well in space. And again, just similar to Johnson as well too, he plants hard on those juke and explodes through those cuts where he's not losing. He's using the juke to help him with his momentum. Just something I'd like to see with Spears.
Yeah, and when you talk about those, his ability to be able to catch the ball there, Foreman, I think one of the fun things that's a little bit different than the majority of the players, specifically in this group, is he gets used on a multitude of routes out of the backfield, which was good to see. I do believe that he's decisive in traffic and he's a creator in space. And again, I'm a sucker for anyone who's going to be able to put moves together in space, because that is where the bread is buttered and our fantasy days are made, when guys are able to make the most when they get to that next level. I think he stays under control when he's cutting, and I'm a fan. I do like what he's got to offer to the game here. Zach, can we count you in on the group of folks who enjoy some Tyjae Spears?
Man, he's fast. He's so quick. In the time it takes Tyjae Spears to get to the line of scrimmage, 49,000 Google searches happen worldwide. 419 Kit Kat bars are consumed. 9,500 tweets are sent, assuming that Elon hasn't crippled the timeline again. Your blood will make 3 complete circuits through your vascular system. UPS can deliver 11,000 packages, and Apple will make $70,000. All of this happens in 1 second. If you blinked, you missed it. Tyjae Spears is a blur to and through the hole, possessing some of the best initial bursts in this class and of players that I have watched in recent memory. He is very quick. And on top of getting up to speed quickly, Spears also has enough juice to effectively and consistently punish teams by running off tackle and getting all the way outside. And I think Spears has very good vision in the second level, maintaining space with angles and his long speed. So there are a lot of things, like you said, JMic, if you're going to be efficient, if you're going to be that fantasy player who's not getting 250 carries, you got to have something to carry that efficiency. And I think Spears's burst and speed does that.
Yes, and that was I try to, as I have my notes, when I get to consolidating everything, I just write a few words at the top. Juice/burst it was the first thing, and I love his versatility, and I think that he's got a place to really be productive at the next level. But again, all that juice, hey, is it really worth the squeeze? Zach, I'm coming right back to you. Tyjae Spears and some areas in his game that we wish were a little bit better.
Yeah, well, Spears did come in at 204 pounds at the Senior Bowl and then weighed in at the Combine at 201. He definitely feels a little undersized at times, sometimes a lot undersized. When asked to run inside or in short yardage situations, Spears consistently lacks the power to get those hard yards. And Tyjae Spears is fine enough as a pass catcher, but I think he struggles mightily when he is put in a position where he has to pass block. And instead of getting leverage or squaring up a defender, he kind of like dips his head and leans a shoulder in the vague direction of a blitzer and just calls it a day. So again, Spears is 5'10" and hovering around 200 pounds. So I think the likelihood of him coming in and controlling a backfield is minimal. But I do think he has the quickness, speed, and enough ability as a receiver to be efficient in a smaller role. And if he gets thrust into a start or two, I think Spears is capable of producing for fantasy. So he's that like pass catcher plus-ish. Like he's not quite a pass catcher plus, but he's a player that I think you can spell a back with, and he's good enough that I think he's going to get some receiving work.
Squarely in the camp of pass catcher plus. What are you putting on the end of that sentence there? Foreman, Tyjae Spears. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Again, with that size there, I would say I'm surprised. I was even surprised with him when he's coming in at 200 pounds. I thought he would have been even a bit less than that. With that size there, he can struggle around between the guards. I'm going to say guards because he can get in with those inside zone runs. He does okay there, but when he really gets into the teeth of those nose tackles or those defensive tackles, he struggles a bit there. And he can get bottled up in that direction there as well too. And as well as he may have had those catches, he seems to be a fine pass catcher, but he's susceptible to dropping the ball more than you'd like to see for someone who's probably going to function as the prototypical satellite back. I don't know. I haven't. You don't hear that term as much anymore, but I would definitely put Spears in that satellite back plus camp, like you see with a James Cook kind of running back. But again, like Zach mentioned, I think if he's given more work, I think it's someone who could be a gem in the second round of your rookie draft. So I'm not sure. Based on ADP, I think I'm going to like him a bit more than the ADP does, but I don't think I'm overly ahead of where ADP has him. So I'll be interested to see again. Obviously, we want to see where all these guys end up, but how his NFL team uses him and values him is going to be something that will be of obvious interest here.
He's a guy that I'm excited to see how other people feel about him. I've tried this year to do my best Zach Reed impression and keep a lot of other opinions out as I go through my process. I did hear about, obviously, the Senior Bowl things when I was listening to the podcast and whatnot, which is how I knew that Tyjae Spears was a name that people were excited to see. But I didn't know anything about his game. And so now that I'm kind of raising my head up out of my burrow to some degree, I'm curious to see how people will like him, because I want to say that I'll be ahead of what folks are, but I don't know. We'll find out. You're bringing up James Cook, Foreman. Listen, that should have been where you just stopped talking right there so that we could transition into the final player on the evening here. One Kenny McIntosh, who in typical Georgia Bulldog fashion has to, if you're not the guy, but you're still pretty good, you have to kind of wait your turn before you actually get the opportunity to really show who you are, what you are. And Kenny McIntosh was one of those guys who, at Georgia, behind a series of running backs who have been fantastic for many years now, was able to increase his workload year over year. And this past season was able to garner 149 carries, 829 yards, and 10 touchdowns for, obviously, the national championship winning Georgia Bulldogs. What he also showed off quite a bit of this season was his chops in the passing game, because the man had 43 catches, 505 yards, a couple scores through the air, but he averaged 11.2 yards per reception. Kenny McIntosh, the less heralded of the Georgia running backs, I'd say, when it comes to this entire process, but a player who, again, we talked about the versatility of Tyjae Spears lining up a little bit and doing some other things. Kenny McIntosh is probably the one player out of this entire group that we've seen line up all over the place and get the ball in space more than probably, I'd say, any of the players that we've gone through over the last 2 weeks. Lots of upside, lots of intrigue, lots of mystery around Kenny McIntosh. I'll let either of you go first, because if either of you are like, yes, give me some Kenny McIntosh, I would love to hear it off the bat. Any takers? Nope. Zach, looks like you've drawn the short straw here. What do you got for us?
I'll jump in. You've got yourself a 2023 second round rookie pick. It's late. It's a veritable blank check. And you're sitting and sifting through the 2023 running back prospects. And you might ask yourself, what exactly does Mr. McIntosh do anyway? Well, he does a little of this and a little of that. You know, in spite of Georgia being a perennial juggernaut, trying to make heads or tails out of its backfield has been difficult at best. Over the past 4 years, we've seen DeAndre Swift, we've seen Elijah Holyfield, we've seen Zamir White, seen James Cook, and now Kenny McIntosh. McIntosh led Georgia's backfield this year as much as anyone ever does. And as a runner, and with his exceptional ability as a pass catcher and route runner, even downfield. And I think McIntosh has good contact balance, usually finishes runs forward. He's at his most dangerous, however, when he can stretch runs off tackle, but he's not really a threat to rip off like huge chunk runs. So again, he's a space back without that long speed. He's a player that you can move all over the field in terms of being a receiver and being able to get out and run routes. Like you mentioned, JMic, like you'll see him split out wide and run routes downfield, create mismatches that way. So there are some things to his game that I don't mind.
And one of the more shocking things, I think, there were times where he would break off longer plays at Georgia, but then you see the combine time and you're like, 4.6, what? This didn't, okay, are you playing faster than you are? Or is it a case where maybe those splashes were just, again, a confluence of all the right things happening at the right time? But that versatility, I think that's something that's going to attract a lot of folks to Kenny McIntosh. And obviously the chops coming out of Georgia, he's been coached up. It's intriguing. Nonetheless, it's intriguing. Foreman, kind words that you may have about one Kenny McIntosh.
Yeah, McIntosh is incredibly versatile. I mean, you don't see a lot of running backs running fade routes from the slot. So again, he's a great pass catcher, maybe one of the better pass catchers in this class. Again, I thought when I watched him on film, I'm like, okay, this guy's got decent long speed. But then, like you just mentioned, you turn on the combine, 4.63. What? I mean, it's like Kamara ran a 4.6. Kamara ran on the 4.6 as well too, but he plays much faster than that. So you know what I mean. How much is It's the underwear Olympics. How much we really put into this? He functions well in space. He's got nice subtle agility. Like he's not like a devastating cutter, but he's got nice subtle agility there. He can run with some power. And like Zach mentioned as well too, he's got some decent contact balance there to be able to bounce off some tackles.
Man, I can't tell you the number of times as I was watching on the film to see him do really cool things in space and still get tackled by the first person. I don't know how many minus marks I have here because I typically do one-on-one in space and in traffic. And I have a lot of minuses next to one-on-one in space. And I think that he can create once the momentum's going. But if he's having to break somebody down, I think that's where we see that lack of explosive agility that would come off of the page that is allow him to be able to break people off. And I think that's what I want so much more for him. It's almost like you do all these really cool things. Where's your creativity in traffic? Where's your ability to really beat people in space and make those one-on-ones and maximize all this versatility that we see? And there's so many plays left on the table that really bothers me. He's one that I just want so much more for because we get a little taste, we get a little hit, but you don't have more to offer. And I want more. Foreman, I'm back to you. Opportunities here for Kenny McIntosh.
Yeah, as we saw with Cook last year as well too, he's not a great running back, if that makes sense. He struggles to run between the tackles. He needs that space to be able to function at his best. he can get bottled up a bit in traffic, like you mentioned there as well too. With the subtle agility, that's saying to me that his agility is a bit muted, and he's like you just mentioned there as well too. He's not able to win a lot of those one-on-one battles, and he's just going down on first contact. I think it'll be interesting to see. I think he's in one of those players where we always talk about with the wide receivers, where his NFL team may value him more than his actual worth as a fantasy player, and his versatility could be his downfall as a fantasy asset. Because again, we're talking about this from the lens of fantasy football rather than as an actual football player. So I think that's going to be something that's going to hurt him as a fantasy asset, where he's not a true running back, where he's more of he's a back that needs space, but he doesn't really do a whole lot with it. So kind of a bit of a misnomer there.
More, Kenny, more. Last words on the evening, Zach, when it comes to player evaluation here. What do you have for Kenny McIntosh?
Yeah, even though McIntosh is carrying, we thought 210, only 204 pounds on his 6-foot frame, he decidedly lacks that power that you would expect. When he meets defenders head on, he struggles to be a bully. And I think, JMic, you hit on this too. He also struggles to be able to be elusive. And though that combination leads to him being taken down on first contact all too often, he struggles with pass blocking more than you would expect for a player regularly used as a receiver. And although McIntosh does often get into the second level on those off-tackle runs, once he gets there, I really don't see him having the elusiveness to be truly explosive. McIntosh isn't going to be a first-round rookie pick for your fantasy team. He may not even be a second-round rookie pick. But I think he profiles as one of those pass catcher pluses, a committee back who should put up enough points through the receiving game to be interesting, but who has the potential with his size and versatility to assume more of a role in the future. So again, that's what we're looking for when we're in that, the second, third, fourth round of your rookie drafts. You're looking for players who have a chance, and especially running backs, who have a chance to get in and give you a game or two or three. Because if Kenny McIntosh pops off for a running back 1 week somewhere, that's worth that third round rookie pick.
And you'll take that all day long if that's what provides itself when it comes to draft time. Fellas, that is 12 running backs down. That concludes. Yes, this has been yeoman's work here. We can pat ourselves on the back, kick our feet up at least for about 6 days before we run it back and get into the quarterbacks and tight ends. But obviously, we have the catch-all show. So if there are players that you haven't heard over the last couple of weeks when it comes to running backs, or obviously even the wide receivers from several weeks ago, we want to hear from you as to players you'd like for us to hear from. You want us to watch Chase Brown? We're excited to be able to watch Chase Brown and add him to the list of players for the Hootenanny. You want us to check out A.T. Perry, Puka Nacua, and his strange running ways? What about Andres Iosivas from Princeton? I don't know how much Princeton tape is out there, but if we can find it, we would be happy to help you prepare for your rookie drafts. Fellas, time has come. We now need to take these players, marry them with players from the previous week, and see where our tiers are stacking up when it comes to our film grades. And again, folks, just to be clear, there's still much to be done in the process. There's pro days. There's the actual NFL draft. Things can change between now and we go forward. But what we're telling you currently are our film grades. And those things are based off of what we've seen on the film. Those won't be changing. In terms of where we may be taking these players moving forward, that may change. But draft grades, our film grades are our film grades are our film grades. We stand on those. We fall on those sometimes. And that's just the way that it is. Foreman, I'm kicking it over to you first to have honors since you had the wipeout earlier with the connection. I'm going to shout out to ISPs everywhere, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Foreman, over to you. Tiers, however you want to lay it out. When you look at these 6 guys, if you want to do just those 6, if you want to put them in conjunction to other tiers that you have of players that we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, Let's talk through it. What do you got for us?
Yeah, by the way, that was my computer downloading software and restarting, by the way. That was not an internet service provider issue there. So shout out to you, AT&T. So I'm going to go through it from the lens of these 6 guys. I have a lot of tape watch for the first 6, but there's a couple more games I want to watch to really separate them out. So for now, I'm going to do these 6 guys. So for me, I've got Roschon at the top of these 6. I think he's in a tier by himself. I honestly, I won't be surprised if I have him somewhere in my top 3, 4. I think he has that ability, and I'm just going to, I think I'm obsessed with those big running backs where I see that power and that ability. It's something I've done it seems like every single year, whether it be Josh Adams, whether it be Tyler Algier, and now Roschon Johnson. I just like these big prototypical running backs. It's my style, and you hit some, you miss some. Hey, Adams had a couple big weeks there, so never forget Josh Adams, 2019. And then the second tier, I do have Izzy and Kendre Miller kind of in the same tier there. I think they're very close for me. I do have Izzy just ahead of Kendre, but I think I could go back and forth there between those two. And then I have Spears and Bigsby in the next tier. They're kind of similar players to me. I have Spears just ahead of Bigsby, and then I've got Kenny McIntosh.
Kenny McIntosh. It truly sounds like a great baseball name. Like he pitched for the Expos in the '93 season or something. Like I feel like that just fits.
Dennis Martinez, Jeff Facero, Kenny McIntosh, that rotation, Wetland coming in to close. It's nice. Maybe we'll trade the Shields, get Pedro in here. Woo!
Listen, we just need a guy to eat up innings. Give me McIntosh. Give me McIntosh. Over to you, Zach. Give me Vaughn. Speaking of another guy, Deuce Vaughn. I'm sure many of you probably want to hear him. If you want him in the catch-all, let us know.
Talk about Lilliputian.
Yeah.
All right, Zach. Let's hear it. Your tiers. Let's lay them out for us.
I'm gonna go all 12 because I've got that offhand.
Do it.
So obviously Bijan, tier of his own, up at the top. I've got Jahmyr Gibbs in a tier of his own at 2. My next 2 are in a tier, and that's Zach Charbonnet and Roschon Johnson. So that's 3, 4 for me. Then I get this real big glut of guys that I'm interested in, I think are going to produce at some point, with Kendre Miller at 5, Devin Achane at 6, the little guy, the pass catcher, Tank Bigsby at 7, who I really like a lot of what he does. And that will be the guy that I could be the most wrong on, I think, in this class because of his skill set. Having him down at 7, I could be wrong on that, and I'll eat that, and I'll be happy to be wrong if he's better than I think he is. 8 is Abanikanda, and 9 is Evans. So that's a tier right there for me. That Miller, Achane, Bigsby, Abanikanda, and Evans, all guys I'm really interested in. 10 is Sean Tucker. Again, there's another guy that maybe I'll be really wrong on. I love a lot of what he does. 11, Kenny McIntosh, and 12, Tyjae Spears. Think about that. As much praise as we just heaped on Tyjae Spears, as much praise as we heaped on Sean Tucker last week, and they're down in that, 10, 11, 12 range. This is a deep class, and it's a deep class with positions that score us fantasy points. We're going to talk about 2 more deep positions next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. But JMic, I'll get out of your way. You can give us your ranking of these backs.
Man, I love how different y'all's are, and I love how different mine is to y'all's as well. And it's fun because as we talk through it, like we have a lot that we enjoy about a lot of these players. This is going to be fun, and I think this is one of those years. I really hope everybody gets similar capital, because then you just have to place your bet. Like, this is what I believe. I really hope that's the case. Bijan Robinson, obviously at the top, his own tier. He's got the highest Arbery grade that I have recorded, and I haven't been able to look at the old stuff that we had in the shared file with Kyle and Riley and everybody else. All my older stuff I don't have, but the things that I have, Bijan grades out better than obviously all those guys in the last couple of years. Jahmyr Gibbs in a tier by himself at the number 2 spot. And then 3 and 4 have the same exact grade for me, Devin Achane and Tank Bigsby. I have Tank tied for 3rd or 4th, whatever you want to call it. Again, I am very bullish. And again, I love what he did as a freshman, and I love the growth, even in the midst of the absolute crap show that was the last couple of seasons, and how much they hated Harsin, but they didn't want to fire him, and whatever else the heck happened. And Bo Nix was terrible, but then good in Oregon. And then it was weird. Things were weird at Auburn, but what he was able to put on tape, I liked a lot. I've got Charbonnet in a tier by himself at 5. And then I have a really unique tier separated by 1 film grade point. Kendre Miller, Roschon Johnson, who scored the same, and then Tyjae Spears, who was 1 point behind them. So they've all in a tier themselves. From there, I have Zach Evans and Sean Tucker in their own tier. I have Izzy Abanikanda at 11. And then Kenny McIntosh, who's a point off from Izzy Abanikanda, who, again, 1 point. So I consider them a tier right now at 11 and 12. And I wouldn't hate having them. And I'm one of those. I think when I look at Abanikanda, Zach, and I don't know how many different ways I'll say his name throughout this, Abanikanda. I've gone back and forth. He's the one. I know you talked about Tank Bigsby being the guy that you were like, man, I'm willing to be wrong on. And Abanikanda's one that I think that I could definitely be wrong on, because he could get up there and be super efficient with very few opportunities. Like, I see it. I very much see it happening. I understand that it can happen. I just don't see it on a play-to-play basis. And yeah, I'm not there. But that's my 12 right now in terms of the film grades, and I'm strangely excited about these group of guys, and especially for me, Tyjae Spears and up. Those 8, I'm really looking forward to how things shake out for those guys. 2 weeks in the books, running backs in the books for the time being until we get to the catch-all. Quarterbacks and tight ends coming up. Is there anything that's been illuminating for you guys as we've gone through the first 4 weeks? 4 weeks of the Hootenanny.
I think, again, this class, the further we dig in, the more it feels like the class that everybody talked about. And I understand that you're not having 6 Saquon Barkleys, and you're not having 6 Justin Jeffersons. And I'm guessing next week when we go through quarterbacks and tight ends, we're not going to have 6 Kyle Pittses, and we're not going to have 6 Trevor Lawrences, or, Jalen Hurts, or whoever it is that is your quarterback. But this is a really good class. It's a deep class. It's got a really high top end. It's really easily identifiable. Peter Howard, friend of the show. You can find him on the Dynasty Grind on Wednesday nights. You can find him on the Crossroads on the DLF family of podcasts. Likes to point out that a good class is an easily identifiable top end of a class. Those are the classes where we can point to players. We can point to Bijan Robinson. We can point to Jahmyr Gibbs. We can point to Jackson Smith and Jigba. We can point to the tight ends, and we can point to those top 3 quarterbacks and say these players are good. And we have that this year. And so while Twitter is spinning itself into oblivion because this isn't the 2017 running back class and it isn't the 2014 wide receiver class, this is a good time to actually buy picks. It's not a good time to buy the 101 because everybody knows, but it's a good time to buy from basically pick 4 to pick 8. It's a great time to do that. And it's a great time to buy early second round picks and hit on some of these running backs where these picks are not going to cost you a lot of capital to get now, where over the last 2 years, it's been a king's ransom. And so that, I think, is it's you need to understand what a good class is and what we mean by a good class and why this is a good class and why it's a buying opportunity to get into a good class.
Preach. Foreman, any final words on week 4 of the Hootenanny part 2 here with the running backs?
No, I think one thing I want to touch on with Bijan is I think a lot of people are comparing him to Barkley, and I think that's off base in the fact that he's better than Barkley. I think he's the best running back prospect we've seen since Adrian Peterson. Like, he just does everything so well. I mean, I would have loved to hear you guys hear what negative thoughts you guys had about him. I'm looking forward to going back and actually, I don't normally listen to the old episodes, but I'm going to have to go back and listen to the old episodes just to hear what y'all had to say, what negative things you came up with.
We basically decided that it looks really weird having a J and an I together, and that's pretty much it. Just that, when you're looking at his,
the double, that is odd. Yeah, I could definitely see that. But yeah, I mean, it's just. But no, I think you hit the nail on the head, Zach. I think a lot of people were just like, I think the community as a whole has a bit overcorrected on the class. Like, oh, this isn't the class we thought it was. No, you just thought it was more than. You're just overlooking some of these. I don't know if I want to say gems, but you're overlooking the depth of this class, where there's going to be a lot of good players, and I think we're going to see the reset of the running back landscape with this class as well too, because I think we've got 7 or 8 guys. And that's why we haven't seen some of these guys. They were waited to sign a little bit, or guys we still haven't. These veterans, we're like, okay, where you're just like, and I think I'll be very interested to see what the landscape looks like after the draft as well too, because we can think, oh, this is a good landing spot, and like, no, it's not.
And the interesting thing about that, and I was on with Peter this week for the Crossroads, and we talked about how the landscape of the NFL has changed because for a while, the Patriots were at the vanguard and they got small. They had the Welker and White out of the backfield. And so then defenses have shifted to now kind of junk defenses where you're running nickel and dime and cover 2 and smaller and faster. And the obvious shift is going to be to go back to bigger, more physical, the tight ends and the running backs. Well, holy cow, here's a class where we just talked about 4 out of the 6 players being prototypical size, those 214, 215, 220 pound backs. And we're going to talk next week about a tight end class. This is the perfect place to start shifting to beat that defense that had shifted to beat the smaller, quicker offense. So I think you're right, Matt. I think over the next few years, we're going to see that come back into vogue, and it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. It'll be good to get ahead of it if you're able, especially if you can get ahead of it with 2nd-round rookie picks.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what teams actually take that approach. I'll be very interested to see with some of these draft selections here, where we have spots that I think there's. I mean, obviously the creme de la creme of the running back landing spot seems to be Miami. A bit unsure about what they're trying to do. It seems like they may want to mess around with Dalvin Cook. It seems I don't know what's going on with him, but I'm very interested to see where these exact landing spots and about how you may have to wait a year or two, kind of like you did with Derrick Henry when he signed behind DeMarco Murray. But you could get a nice payday for waiting a year or two. So something to practice patience with this, especially because we're talking about dynasty. But I feel like we see these guys who pop off like, oh man, I wish that was me. But just relax. RELAX.
Did you have to emerge from the darkness to find that one, Foreman?
I did a little bit of ayahuasca. I dated a celebrity, a B-list celebrity. So
All right. I mean, you're 1-2 week notice away from playing for the Jets, so let me know how it goes. Listen, as of this recording, we are 41 days out from the NFL draft, which is wild to think about because we're going to blink and it's going to be here. And all of our hopes and dreams and excitements to see where these guys land, who falls, what things get pairing, all of the hopes that we can drum up. We're one step closer to the draft, one step closer to the actual rookie drafts that we get to have. And having all the more fun when it comes to that. So I'm excited. I think you guys did a great job of summing up our time here with part 2 of the rookie Hootenanny for the RBs. And I'm excited to be able to continue forward next Thursday as we continue to keep it popping with quarterbacks and tight ends. Zach, final words on the evening go to you.
How did our editor not name this show Abanikanda Forever? How did that not happen? We'll have to, in post production we'll get that going. But yeah, we appreciate you guys in the chat watching live. Appreciate people who are checking us out on the pod. If you've been rolling with us for a long time, we appreciate you. If you're new, we love that too. We're glad you're here. Glad you're here for the Hootenanny. Next week, quarterbacks, tight ends, and then audience participation. We need to know who you want to see, who you want us to get eyes on, who you want to hear about, who you want us to evaluate. Wide receivers, running backs. We'll probably do 2 catch-all shows. We'll probably do a wide receiver show and a running back show. I am at Tacit Assassin 13 on Twitter. Be looking for me to tweet out, and you can feel free to drop in DMs or respond to that tweet who you want us to see. JMic is at JMic Check. Matt is at Fat Mormon with 2 T's, just like it sounds, very phonetic. And this has been the Dynasty Dummies. We really appreciate you rolling with us, and we'll catch you next week. Peace.
Hit the button, Zach.
It's over here.
Hit the button.
I found it. I got it. I'm good.